August is here, and that means that the weather and the election cycle are heating up. The best way to beat the heat and stay up to date on the latest news from the US election to international breaking headlines is to become a DSR member and gain access to additional content across our network, in addition to other exclusive benefits. Use code BEATTHEHEAT to get 50% off of your membership and sign up today at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. That's Beat the Heat at thedsrnetwork.com/buy. Now please enjoy the show.
This is the Daily Blast from the New Republic, produced and presented by the DSR Network. I'm your host, Greg Sargent. Over the weekend, the New York Times reported that Donald Trump is deeply unsettled about Kamala Harris's successful launch, with his pollster blaming her popularity on the media. Interestingly, however, this anger has led him to escalate the private talk about how Democrats are going to steal the election from him, according to the Times. Which means it's time for us to talk about what it means that if Trump loses, he simply will not accept it, and what we should be doing about this right now. So today we're chatting with Amanda Carpenter, a prominent Never Trump conservative, an editor at Protect Democracy, and a close observer of Trump GOP pathologies, who has been tweeting about a coming Trump steal attempt. It's great to have you back on, Amanda.
Hey, happy to be here.
So the Times report says that Trump is in a foul mood, which I'm guessing is an understatement. And he's deeply unsettled by all the media attention that Kamala Harris is getting. She's controlling the news cycle, and he isn't, calling her all kinds of enraged names behind the scenes. Trump's pollster, Tony Fabrizio, tells the Times that this is all the fault of a huge, quote, in-kind contribution of free media to Harris. It's a key tell that Trump's pollster is accusing the media of being in the tank for her. They're seeing the same numbers that we are. What's your sense of what's really going on there behind the scenes?
The story opens up with these donors being unsettled that Trump is so angry behind the scenes. And it all goes along with this thing is that, the media was told, as I think were sort of relayed by Trump's own campaign, to say, look at him to have a new tone at the Republican convention. He's a new man after the assassination attempt. And I don't want to make fun of that whatsoever, because I actually do believe that Trump is going through something with that assassination attempt. It may have something to do with him not doing as many public events. And listen, completely understandable. Also, the Iranian assassination plot that was disrupted by the FBI, the hacking that they're now facing. I mean, we don't know everything that's going on there, but certainly his security has been increased. Certainly he is under attack in a legitimate way that may have something to do with his behavior. That said, that does not change the fact that his campaign was telling members of the press, look for a new Donald Trump, one who is more serious, one who is, ready to take the reins of power in a more responsible way in the aftermath of this. That is not true. That is not the tone he has adopted, as evidenced by this story in which the donor class, which saw him behind closed doors, was sort of unnerved that he was still angry. He was still using stop the steal rhetoric and sort of just saying haughtily, that's who I am. Well, yes, this is who he actually has been consistently, just because he's been a little bit more quiet for whatever reason that may be, does not mean that his plans and promises have not changed for a second term, or the way that he plans to campaign and, try to win or steal or manipulate the election in any way that he sees fit, in the way that he did in the aftermath of the 2020 election that he lost.
Just a quick snapshot of the latest polling. In 538's averages as of Sunday evening, Harris leads Trump by 2.3 points nationally, nearly 3 points in Michigan, 1.1 points in Pennsylvania, and 2.3 points in Wisconsin. The Times' own new polling has Harris up 4 in all 3 of those blue wall states. It's still very close, but in all those states, Harris's lead is slowly expanding. So, Amanda, I think it's probably true that Harris is benefiting to some degree from all the media attention she's getting, But on the other hand, and you know Republican politics well, at this point, Republicans have been running millions in ads attacking her as a radical leftist for some time now.
The momentum is on her side. And the fact that she is drawing huge crowds is certainly that is going to get under Donald Trump's skin. But, we'll see what happens. I mean, this is the honeymoon phase. It will get more serious going into September when they do have that face-off at ABC News on September 10th. But one thing I'm going to say, I'm impressed by Donald Trump floated out the idea that Fox News should be hosting one of the presidential debates. And that appears to be something that the Harris campaign dismissed out of hand, which is correct. But I think it's worth unpacking a little bit more why, that should not be an option, not only for the first debate, but any of the debates going into the future. Fox News was one of the biggest promoters of the election conspiracies in the aftermath of the 2020 election. As a result, they had to pay that $787 bazillion settlement with Dominion, led to the firing of Tucker Carlson. But the idea that Fox can say, like, that's all put behind us now, and now we are in a position to host a debate, I think should absolutely be off the table.
So Trump allies have reportedly been privately telling him that all the racist and personal attacks on Harris are failing, yet he's kept up the name-calling even in the face of this poll shift. He can't accept that the broader public sees her differently from how he and MAGA do and how J.D. Vance does. It's funny, for months, I want to bring this up because it's a weird dynamic shift, I think. For months, we were told that if this race is all about Trump, he's less likely to win. But now the focus is largely on this new alternative to Trump and to President Biden. And Harris is edging into the lead, even without a relentless focus on Trump to remind people who he is. Is there like a kind of public hunger to move past the Trump-Biden era that's kicking in here, do you think?
Well, I certainly passed the Biden era on the Democratic Never Trump side, which resulted in the Harris nomination that is, going to happen at the DNC. But I want to talk with you a little bit about these attacks that Trump is leveling on Harris, because they are not successful right now. I think people are largely just grossed out by it. But if you look at how Trump rose to national political prominence and what his successful strategy for that was, it was birtherism. I mean, This was before he was a candidate. It was around 2010, 2012, when he was really dabbling in these waters. And that was gross, but he views it as a success story because that made people take him seriously, or at least pay attention to what he was saying when it came to the political scene, right? That is what bridged him from New York tabloid apprentice guy to kind of now he's talking about politics now. Oh, maybe he would like to run for president. So I still think he views that as a success, but I've been watching why people think this is the wrong thing to do. And it is wrong, period. It's racist. I don't think it's exactly like birtherism in the way that MAGA people hear it. To me, what he's trying to do, this is more of how the right-wing movement maybe effectively Pocahontas Elizabeth Warren, because what they're really saying, they're not saying she's not an American. Again, it is racist, so I don't want your listeners to get me wrong. But what they're saying is that is sort of in line about their slurs about her being the DEI candidate. They're saying she's just playing these games with her ethnicity. Here she's this, here she's that. This is why you shouldn't take her seriously. I think that's actually, that's the undercurrent. And it's more about this manipulation of what the left does and how they get ahead. So I just, those are just my thoughts on it. Maybe you think that's wrong.
No, I agree. Actually, I think one of the reasons that these attacks aren't resonating, and I've said this on here before, is that Trump and MAGA and J.D. Vance are simply incapable of grasping that a lot of Americans might see Harris as a success story, a multiracial democracy success story. I just don't think that they're capable of grasping it in those terms.
Yeah, not only that, but they're so used to playing these gross race-based identity games If they can, that's just the way that they've decided to take this shot at her. It's gross. It's shocking to watch, but these are the waters in which they traffic.
Well, the Times report says Trump has been seething that all this is unfair to him. He wasted all this money and time attacking Biden's age, only to suddenly face an energetic opponent in Harris now. And he told an aide that by replacing Biden with Harris, Democrats are trying to steal the election from him again. I think it's pretty dark and disturbing that Trump's immediate go-to is to pretend he's being cheated. And I think he's going to get more public in telling MAGA this, too, if he remains behind or goes on to lose. Now, I want to ask about what you've been saying. You've been tweeting that we should brace for MAGA-loyal state officials to do what Trump unsuccessfully pressured Mike Pence to do. What's the scenario that worries you right now?
Well, something that my colleagues at Protect Democracy have been tracking quite intensely are efforts at the state and local level to allow the certification process to become a vector to play games. I mean, I'm saying this sort of broadly because it does vary from state to state. But the way to think about this is, and I can draw a straight line to what happened in Georgia last week. If you look at what happened on January 6th, like, yes, obviously there was insurrection, there were all the lawsuits, but the pressure campaign was squarely aimed at Mike Pence and manipulating his role as certifying the election as the VP into something else, right? Like saying this is a vector that we can use to obstruct, delay, or prevent Joe Biden from being certified as president. That was the huge play, right? To get something to happen there, whether that had to do with the fraudulent election schemes, trying to get the insurrectionists to intimidate him. That was the main event. That's what they were going for. Now what you're saying is a continuation of that January 6th strategy, and that presented an ugly head last week in Georgia, when the Georgia Board of Elections, which is just made up by, 3 people who are not elected, they are appointed, 2 Republicans, 1 Democrat, they voted to allow local or county officials to launch inquiries into the election before certification. Now that is a new step. That is a vector for chaos to unfold. And I think we have to talk about the certification process. When you have local, county officials certifying the election results, they are like scorekeepers. They tabulate the results, they record it, into their little scorebook, and they say, this is who won the game. If you made the analogy to a football game, they are the people up there in the box. They are not players on the field. They are not referees. What this does is make it a way they can be players and referees, because the Georgia Board of Elections said, okay, you can conduct a reasonable inquiry. What does that mean? Nobody knows. The good news is that this is clearly not in accordance with state law, right? Like not only in Georgia, but like other states where other people have contemplated this kind of action. And it usually doesn't get there, because once county officials are presented with evidence that if you do this, well, number one, it's not going to be effective because it's not in accordance with state law. And number 2, you open yourselves up to legal exposure. And number 3, a court probably will not go along with you. And the reason why people should be so confident in knowing that this is not in accordance with state laws is because the states already have rules and regulations to resolve elections disputes, right? Like that's why we have recounts. That's why there's canvasses. That's why we have, things that happen after the results are certified. I mean, to even bring a lawsuit about fraud, or if you do have a challenge, you have to have results to go from, right? There has to be some score that you say, okay, now we want to look into this. And so, this may take some work. The easiest thing to do, honestly, is just for Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger to uphold the law and, have some kind of talk to the Board of Elections and say, listen, this is inconsistent with our state laws, because this is not, how we resolve these kinds of, if there are issues, they're not going to be resolved legally through some kind of inquiry conducted by the county.
I want to say here that it's really pretty important that Democrats won so many of the races in 2022. I'll remind everybody that we now have Democratic governors in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. And so, I think there could still be shenanigans of some kinds, but it's certainly a reason for confidence that you've got real public officials in these places now.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say it. I don't want people to say like, oh, it'll be taken care of. Even if it is taken care of, as we've seen, even when these cases lose in court, even when the institutions do quote unquote hold, these sort of maneuvers become soapboxes to spread disinformation and to promote the conspiracies. And, in many cases, that's the real point of this. And so it is incredibly important to stay on it.
Yeah, and it's incredibly disturbing as well that Trump's immediate instinct when he starts to sense that he's going to lose is to go here and start talking about how he's been cheated. We know he's going to do this again if he loses this time. I want to stress that this race is still a coin flip. Trump could still win, but Trump is acting like he genuinely fears he's going to lose. And I want to ask you, you know Republican politics pretty well. How deep do you think the appetite for another coup attempt really runs among Republicans? I mean, last time you had half of House Republicans voted not to certify Biden's electors, maybe more. Numerous Republicans were in on the plot. Virtually the entire GOP enthusiastically spent the last 4 years helping Trump cover up his insurrection. Clearly, Republicans thought they needed to keep Trump's constituencies happy for the party to remain competitive, but then they mostly lost in 2022. And if they do lose in 2024, does anything change vis-a-vis their loyalty to him? Do they really go along with this yet again?
Why not? Yeah, listen, I certainly, I detect there's Trump fatigue, not among the party loyal, but the way that I think about it is at this place in the election of 2020 during the last cycle, we did not have people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger speaking out. We did not have people like, the governor, or the mayor in Arizona that spoke out at the rally this weekend, which I can't get out of my head, where he just stood up and said, he was endorsing Harris and was telling his fellow Republicans, you don't owe this party a damn thing. And that just resonated with me so much because, what do you owe someone who not only keeps lying to you about circumstances that happen, whitewash January 6th, but keeps losing? Even on a base level. So I just quoted, I think because everyone was still so blindsided by 2016 and horrified by what happened on January 6th, we find it hard to believe that circumstances maybe really have changed. But if you look at the evidence, if you look at all these Republicans who are now just plainly speaking out, and I say this as someone who was a never Trumper from 2016, it is not that lonely anymore. It was really lonely in those days. It is not like that anymore.
It sure seems like that. And with Trump, presuming again he loses, it's close. We don't know what's going to happen, but presuming he loses, we're in a situation where Republicans will have lost the last 4 national elections in a row under Trump's watch, right? Under Trump and MAGA, politics, with 2022 being a little mixed, but not really that mixed. And so I really do wonder, with Trump at that point, presumably not running in 2028, maybe then they finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know.
You would think. Obviously, there are younger governors like Ron DeSantis. I would even put Brian Kemp, people in there who are waiting for the change to come, but not really ready to be a part of that change. But the idea, will losing make Republicans change course? I think you have to say yes. But on the other hand, I think about how sense of grievance is so ingrained into the grassroots now, and sort of, having the chip on your shoulder of being in the wilderness and of being on the outs is sort of part of that Republican identity at this point. I don't know, but I would say, one thing I am sort of watching, I'll know when the base thinks that Trump is going to lose is when they start to think about you, when you start to see them get excited about the prospect of being in the opposition, so to speak, when Kamala Harris is president.
I just had a flash forward to the Republican primary debates of 2028, where Ron DeSantis and all the other candidates are asked to raise their hands if they agree that the 2024 election was stolen from Trump, and they all raised their hands.
I thought you were going to say when they were going to get him out of jail.
Oh, forgot about that part. Yeah.
Just joking.
All right, Amanda Carpenter, thanks so much for coming on with us today.
Hey, thanks.
You've been listening to The Daily Blast with me, your host, Greg Sargent. The Daily Blast is a New Republic podcast and is produced by Riley Fessler and the DSR Network.